I got to the Current in the fall of 1976 when I started my freshman year. And I was a 7-year undergraduate, and I spent 5 of those 7 years on the Current staff as a reporter, as news editor for 2 years, um, as like a special projects editor for 1 year, and then I was editor in 80, 81. Um, I, uh, I went to Kirkwood High School and did not work for the student newspaper there, but did take a couple of journalism classes with a storied uh, teacher named Homer Hall, H.L. Hall, who was probably the best known high school journalism teacher in the country at the time. He, he's he's kind of a legendary figure, and I'd always enjoyed writing, and he kind of put a spark in me to take up journalistic writing. And so when I got to UMSL, one of the first things I did my first week on campus was to go to the Current's offices, which at the time were on the second floor of the university center, right above the lounge. And everything's different over there now. I'm not even sure the lounge exists, but very small offices dominated by a ping pong table. And that's I guess we did paste up and everything right there in those offices. Uh, and I went to work. The news editor at the Current at the time was Marie Casey, who now runs a big PR firm in St. Louis, Casey Communications. The editor was a guy named Tom Wolfe, who for years, and maybe still does, worked for the St. Louis Business Journal. And and it was populated as well. It was frequented. The offices were frequented by a cadre of longtime staffers, including a couple former editors, Paul Fay and Walt Chasik, but people like Bill McMullen. Um, there were a bunch of people who became I became really good friends with me and became really good friends to me. And um, I just the Current became pretty much my full-time job beginning in the fall of '76. Accomplishments. Missed a lot of classes. Uh, had so many occasions on which I laughed to the point I couldn't breathe that I can't count them all. Um, as editor, I guess one of the things that I was proud of is that uh, we published a literary magazine for the first time that we had talked about for years. Lasted just one issue, unfortunately. That was the only year it appeared. Um, and then as on the editorial page, I engaged in a kind of a protracted campaign to get the Associated Students of the University of Missouri, ASUM. I don't know if that even exists anymore, but to get it booted off of campus because it was pretty clear that they were taking a lot of our money and giving UMSL nothing in return. They were representing strictly the interests of the residential students at UMC. And so after running into brick walls trying to get them to carry our flag a bit, I just concluded we needed to get rid of them. They were doing nothing but draining our pockets to finance UMC's interests. And that campaign fell on deaf ears for most of the year, and then finally in the closing weeks of the spring semester in '81, the student body president and vice president offered a resolution to the Student Government Association that basically agreed with everything we had been campaigning for, that called for their ouster from campus, and it passed, and they got their asses booted off, which was deeply satisfying. But um, I mean, most of I guess I don't think of the Current, my years at the Current in terms of accomplishments so much as any small success I've had in my career has been a product of the great teachers and mentors that I've had along the way, and that lineage of mentorship really goes begins with the Current. I mean, that's I worked under a number of spectacular editors who were mentors to me, not only in how you lead the newspaper, but in various aspects of how you lead your life too. And people like Gina Weinstein, who was just a fantastic leader. And it's not until you get a little bit further down the road, that you really truly appreciate how remarkable some people are in your life, and that was certainly the case with me. I knew that Gina was a great editor when she was there, and I knew Bob Richardson was a great editor, and Tom Wolfe, and the other people I worked for. But years later, I realized that they were more than just good. They were pretty damn spectacular. And to think that we were all in our early 20s, if that, they were pretty precociously talented. So what I think I got a lot more out of the Current than I ever gave to it. I think it started me on my career. I mean, it calcified my intentions to take up a writing career, and I certainly learned more about journalism at the Current than I did in any classroom. And in fact, went to work for the late great Globe Democrat while I was at the Current, and so that was my first big newspaper job. Well, I mean, the big challenge, I think, for anybody who's serious about the Current is coming up with a balance between working for the newspaper and being a student, and that was a challenge that I cannot claim to have mastered in any fashion while I was there. It was, I got my act together as a student right about the time I became editor, and so that was pretty late in the process. I basically had 2 freshman years, 2 sophomore years, and 2 junior years, and then 1 senior year. That's how my 7 years broke down. And so that balance was elusive. And the other challenge, well, as editor, certainly the biggest challenge was motivating a staff that was mostly unpaid, or paid so little that it was a joke to consider it pay, really. I think as editor, I made $60 a week. That strikes me as right. $60 a week, and it was 50 hours a week of work. So you do the math. It was not a good breakdown. And also getting at the time we were completely we were reliant on student activities fees for a portion of our budget, but certainly not the lion's share of it. And the rest, of course, came through advertising. And I know you guys have had struggles with that same, managing to get that advertising nailed down. We had no trouble getting the advertising. However, we had a hell of a time billing the advertisers after we'd run their ads. The business staff was somewhat unmotivated in following through. So we wound up in a financial pinch at the end of my year as editor that I wish we hadn't, but alas. ASUM was certainly it was their first year on campus, or their second maybe, when I was the editor, and that was a huge issue. The presidential election in 1980, Reagan versus Carter. President Carter came to campus and gave it, delivered a speech in the Mark Twain building, and so that was a big deal. There were things don't change much from year to year. They're the same controversies. I can't think of anything in particular that jumps out of my memory as being that really set 80-81 apart from other years that school has seen. There would be controversies involving particular professors. There would be money disputes. There would be, UMSL had taken over the Marillac campus, now called the South Campus, relatively recently at that point, and its plans for that campus, which were still embryonic, were, they were a subject of great interest. But yeah, I've written like 10,000 stories since I was editor of the Current, so I'm having trouble remembering specific, things that were happening at UMSL. But well, it made it. I mean, working for the Current was a great piece of on the job training in just the tool, developing a toolkit as a reporter and later as an editor. And once you experience the excitement of writing on deadline, reporting and writing on deadline, it's pretty hard to find anything else that provides that. I mean, it's a real charge, I think. And what I found was that I was good at digging. I enjoyed the digging part of reporting a great deal. The writing I enjoyed too, but it was more like puzzle solving. It was a different kind of enjoyment. Digging was just pure fun, I thought, and talking to people, interviewing. I'm slightly introverted, probably, if left to my own devices, and reporting forced me to get out of my own head and to talk to people I would otherwise not have talked to at all. And it was because of the Current that I brazenly called the city editor of the Globe Democrat, Sue Ann Wood, in about May of 1978, and told her that I was, told her my name, told her that I had a lot of experience, but I thought I could help her paper out. And for reasons that defy me, she did not hang up. She instead invited me in. It wasn't until we were about halfway through the interview, I think, that she realized I had no experience whatsoever, except for a handful of clips from the Current, and that, I was looking for a job as a copy boy. And if months later, I got a call asking if I was still interested in working at the Globe, and I said, well, yeah, of course. And so in the summer of '78, I was brought in to take a test, an editorial test, and did really well on it. And they offered me a job as a copy boy. So I did that, and they let me string while I was trying to write occasional features. And in the summer of '79, I was offered an internship, paper's only editorial internship that year. And so I reported in mostly North St. Louis County, municipal and municipal government and school board stories in kind of the rough inner ring of cities in St. Louis County, like Wellston, Pagedale, which the Globe had not historically devoted a lot of attention to, and Riverview. I know I did quite a bit of coverage in Riverview, and really the internship went so well that it was an all but stated understanding that once I got my degree, they'd offer me a reporting job. And of course, like I said, I did that in 1978. I didn't graduate until '81, but as soon as I graduated, they did in fact offer me a reporting job. So I went to work for the Globe, and then 6 months after I started as a reporter covering county government in Clayton, we all got the word that the Globe was going to fold. The Pulitzers had bought us out, and then there was that whole dust up with the Department of Justice forcing the Globe to find a buyer. And I left as that buyer prepared to take over and moved to Alaska and worked for the Anchorage Times. So that's how the Current kind of dovetailed into newspapering, I guess. So for a lot of the time, from '78 on, I finished at the Current in '81. For those 3 years, I was working at the Globe like 24 hours a week, editing the Current for one of those years, and then being news editor or something else the years I was an editor. So I was doing both and carrying close to full load. Well, I couldn't do it now, but I was able to do it then. So. That's a very tough question to answer. I love the work. I love writing and doing it on deadline, having to do it quickly. I think everybody is attracted to the business out of ego to a certain extent. You like to see your name in print with your work laid out before the world. And there's nothing more exciting, or there wasn't for me when I was at UMSL, than walking into the cafeteria and watching other students reading the paper and realizing that they're reading your story. That's a big charge. And that's something you never lose, no matter how many years you do it. It stays with you. It's always a thrill. But it's, of course, as it is with any pursuit, it's the people that make it really great. And I always had the sense when I was working for the Current that I was surrounded by, I was part of a magical community almost, that the people who were with me were really, really talented. And that, I couldn't help but get the feeling that somewhere down the road, decades on, people would look back at this gathering of individuals and say, holy shit, look at who was all there at one time, because I really did get to work and play with some amazing people who remain my friends today. I'm very thankful for that. We've all done a pretty good job of staying in touch over the years. The Current stays with you. I mean, you stay up until 4 o'clock in the morning pasting up newspaper pages, and then having to go to take a midterm 3 hours later. And, you forge bonds and kind of fire. And so it's, it was the friendships I developed, I think, that I have come to appreciate the most about my years at the Current. It is largely a thankless pursuit in many ways. You're working for a school paper. Students at UMSL at the time were it was an entirely commuter campus at the time. And so there was a great transience in the student body, really no cohesion. It was a very different place from what it is today. And to produce a newspaper for that community when there really isn't much community, it's an underappreciated, task. And, but in doing it, I guess we were all the same sort of misfits that were attracted to something so masochistic, and it, it was a group of really funny, smart, quick-witted, fast on their feet, well-read, irreverent, anti-authoritarian, smart asses, and we had a lot of fun. We had just so much fun, and you see that same sort of person attracted to the business professionally as well. When you get into metro newsrooms, you're surrounded by kind of that same archetype, and which makes you go to any town in America, and the fastest, funniest, smartest room around is the city room of the local newspaper, and that's why it attracts that kind of personality. Oh, absolutely. I have a 22-year-old daughter who's just started school, and I have tried to very gently push her towards the school paper. Now, I have to be gentle about it because, I've been away from newspapers for, I haven't written for a daily newspaper now since New Year's Day in 2009. write books. And Sailor, my daughter, sees all the work involved in putting together a book, and I imagine that can be pretty daunting. If you're not actually the person doing it, then it just looks like an awful lot of work. Um, but but hopefully she's gonna come to the conclusion on her own that uh, that might be worth doing, because she's a hell of a writer, a much better writer than I was at her age. Oh man, there are several for which the statute of limitations may not yet have expired, so I have to be careful about what I talk about. But you know, I don't want to get bogged down in the specifics, because I don't want that then I'd have to start naming individual names, and the fact of the matter is that uh, what made the place so amazing was, like I said, this magical community that the staff becomes over time. And um, absent any one member of which would materially affect that community, so everybody on staff played a role in creating this incredible fraternity, for lack of a better way of putting it. And you know, the we had some epic parties, just epic. And at one point, we rented out the Coral Courts Motel and had a gangster party, a John Dillinger party, where everybody had to dress as a '30s gangster or a gangster's mall. That was pretty fun, from what I remember of it. And there was, there were some, there was a lot of partying that went on. We'll suffice it. You know, we'll just stop right there. It was a, it was an energetic staff.